What's up, Josh? Back in the studio today, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's been a good week. How about you, man?
It's been a great week. Three days in the studio in a row, man. It's almost like you can't get enough, right?
Right, exactly. It's addicting. All of you that are not podcasting, you should be podcasting.
Absolutely.
But just don't be competition for us or we will find you.
Right?
Just kidding. You don't have to trust any of my threats. But anyway, man, today I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a lighter subject. How about we discuss the modern church?
All right. What about the modern church?
I guess let's, for starters, what's your experience growing up in church?
I had a buddy who growing up was Mormon, so I did experience the Mormon church a couple of times, but I was practicing Baptist. I was a Southern Baptist. I went to a Baptist church growing up. I know when I was really young, I had a Hispanic babysitter.
Okay.
And so occasionally we'd go to Sunday church with her, but that was more of a Catholic style church at that point. But I don't really remember anything about that. So most of my religious experience and church experience is on the Baptist side of things.
Okay. What do you remember from the Mormon church? Anything specific? Just curious.
Honestly, not really. I guess I was too young my buddy was kind of a troublemaker, to be honest with you. So like we tried to get out of it if we could. So we were like skipping like the sermons and stuff like that. So honestly, it wasn't really.
You just sound like a sane person. I'm just kidding. For all
but yeah, no,
Mormons out there.
It was one of those things I really didn't get that much out of it, but I know their faith is a lot different because they use the was that the Book of Joseph or whatever it is, or
That's the Book of Mormon, yeah.
well, the Book of Mormon, which is
Written by Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith. Okay, so I was close. I had my facts a little off, but
Right.
but I don't know anything about that because I never read the book or was associated with it in any way, shape, or form.
That's actually kind of funny because a couple years ago I had the chance to speak with some young Mormon missionaries, and they invited me to come to a Sunday service which wasn't that far away from my apartment at the time there in Lincoln. And I actually attended. You know, it really reminded me of like a really conservative Lutheran church, because I grew up in a very conservative Lutheran church, if anybody's familiar with the Wells, because like most Lutheran churches you see here is part of ELCA, the ELCA, but I grew up in a very small, almost like the Roman Catholic of Lutheran churches, just not comparable in size to the Roman Catholic Church. And the Mormon service actually reminded me a lot of it. It's just that there was like 3 different classes you took, and it was like an hour each, so it was like a 3-hour ordeal.
Oh wow. I do remember the Mormon church time, I guess, not really the sermon, because like I said, we skipped a lot of those, but
Right.
The actual like church time, the time that we were there, was pretty substantial. At least, I was young. I was probably in like 6th or 7th grade when I went,
Yeah.
and it just felt like forever.
Right. One thing I will say is that they were very kind.
They are. They're very kind religion.
People. And I didn't even feel like it was the kind of kindness like, hey, we're trying to convert you. It was just like a genuine, uniform kindness. Like,
Yeah.
And it was cool. I couldn't accept, I guess, the doctrine, so to speak,
Yeah.
for the most part. Some of it was very broad, anything you'd hear really in another church. But then when they start diving into like content from the Book of Mormon, it starts to get a little bit mythological, whatever I want to say.
Yeah.
A little bit mystical, and I couldn't accept it. So obviously I didn't return.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, definitely. Were you involved with any like church programs growing up, like maybe a Awanas or something, or like any youth groups?
I did attend a youth group. It was. When was youth group? I want to say it wasn't the same time as church.
No, it usually wasn't. It's usually like sometimes they have it like after school.
I think mine was like Wednesday nights.
Yeah,
at like 7 or something like that.
That sounds like the youth group time.
And honestly, I actually really enjoyed it. I made a lot of friends. The church that I remember the most when I was going through high school, like middle school into high school, we weren't a very big congregation. Our congregation was maybe 20 people. It was really small. It was a church that our pastor had started, and we had moved several different buildings. We'd started off at a VFW. That was where I first started going. That's where we went. Then we moved to a school, my elementary school. Actually, I wasn't going there at that point, but we actually used that. We actually got access to that for our church sermons and whatnot. And that actually changed things a little bit. It felt more churchy.
Mm-hmm.
We'd use the music room, and the music had the stages, like the steps. So that made it seem more churchy, stuff like that. But I really enjoyed my time in church. But I'm one of those people. Do I believe that there's a higher power? Of course. But I don't think that you need to practice your faith in a congregation of people to be religious.
Yeah, and many people would disagree with that, but I know what you're saying. They say 95% of people in the world believe that there's a higher power, that they believe in a god or gods. I mean, they believe in a higher power of some sort. Only 5% really walk around thinking that, life is nihilistic, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
So you're definitely in the majority there. Well, what was it about your youth group and time in church that you really liked?
Honestly, it was kind of I was bullied a lot in school.
Okay.
Especially middle school. So going to church kind of made me get out of the realm of being bullied. It was kind of that time that I could actually go and hang out with people and spend time with people that actually cared about me. Not that my parents didn't care about me, but it's different when your parents care for you, but when you actually have a genuine our youth group leaders. Actually, I remember their daughter and me were friends since we were really young, and I had no idea they actually attended this church, so I went, and they became our youth group leaders, and it was kind of interesting because they were already kind of like a mother and a father to me. So at that point, it was kind of like having that second shoulder to kind of cry on, so to speak, or that second ear to listen to when it's something you didn't really feel comfortable talking to your parents about.
Right.
And so I think it was just having that outlet to go in and spend that time and not really worry about what was going on, tomorrow at school, or what was, what I had to look forward to or what I didn't have to look forward to, for that matter. School was miserable for me until I switched schools. We'll just put it that way.
Right. You've mentioned that on other episodes too.
And so that was kind of my outlet for that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It was almost like you were being accepted into a community.
Exactly.
And like a community where they were just a little bit nicer than what you were used to out in the world.
Yep.
And I definitely had a very similar experience to that. And when I was younger, I definitely enjoyed church and doing, as you say, churchy things. I like that, by the way. But I guess getting on to the topic, I want to know. I'm going to assume, as much time as I've known you, you don't attend church now, right?
No.
And neither do I. And I've noticed that trend in a lot of young people our age and even older people, but I've also noticed that in a lot of men, to break it down a little bit more. And I guess, have you ever really thought about why you just stopped going?
I think part of that had to do with like how small our congregation was. We were like a family, and for me, it was trying to find a congregation that had that same feel to it.
Right.
And not only that, there's something awkward when you show up for service on Sunday and nobody there. Whereas like when I was introduced to this church, I knew the person that took us. It wasn't my parents. It was actually a friend of my dad's who was helping my dad remodel a house. He's the one that actually took us to church, and he'd come pick us up on Sundays. And then my mom actually started attending church with us, which was really cool. But I guess I forgot to mention this, but so I went through basic training back in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually did attend church while I was at basic training. They had a sermon or church time every Sunday. And it kind of made me get re in touch with my faith.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. And I kind of realized how much I actually missed it, being around and just having that sense of tranquility, I guess. But I don't know why, like when I came back from basic training in AIT, I don't know why I didn't continue, going there. I think it's just because there it was a little more comfortable because like you knew the people you were going with because you were all in basic training together, right?
Right.
Not only that, it was a way to get away from the drill sergeants and kind of that relaxation time for that 1 hour on Sundays, but I feel like it was kind of like an in the moment kind of thing, but I've never really lost touch like with my faith.
Right. It was more convenient to go to chapel or to a devotion while you were there.
Exactly.
Plus, you're with your brothers and your sisters, and
Yeah.
So I can definitely see how it's different. And honestly, I think a big part of it for me was definitely a lot of it was a convenience thing, but a lot of it too is that I do have my own criticism with the church. I don't know about you, but when I look into the church today, I see a lot of flaws.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular criticism of the church before I start listing off mine?
Well, considering that I haven't really been in church in ages, it seems like I can't really give you any really good criticism about it aside from the fact that I feel like they're probably not. Honestly, man, I don't even know, to be honest with you. Like, I can't think of anything at the moment.
No, but if you do think of it, further in the episode, just let me know. But definitely one thing that I've noticed about the modern church, and with pretty much all of them, hands down, that I've ever attended, and I've attended a lot of them, just, hanging out with different people. Maybe I was with a girlfriend for a while, and she went to a particular church, so I always went with her, is that you definitely see a lot of secularism. A lot of secular ideas have seeped into the churches.
Secular?
Yeah. Secular, to define to our listeners, is worldly. It has nothing to do with a god or a higher power. It's everything that's just worldly. So, like, a lot of ideas, like, a lot of churches will teach stuff like social justice.
Really?
Yes. Almost like a social gospel. You've actually heard people like Al Sharpton, if you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
He's a reverend. And to me, reverend means, you're a Catholic, you're Christian.
Yeah.
But, he is told that he actually preaches a social gospel. And it's like when you look through the religious text of Christianity, which is the Bible, you don't see anything about a social gospel.
No,
that's a very made-up term, and it's very secular.
That's interesting.
Right. And so I've definitely seen a lot of social movements seeped into the church, a lot of this, accepting and tolerance. And again, tolerance is a very secular word. It's not a religious word at all.
Yeah, I see that. Huh, interesting.
Well, and the only reason I have a big problem with it is because you've definitely probably seen this. I think we all have. You'll see somebody who's a very strong, devout Christian, and then some atheist or agnostic fuck comes along, and they will throw an Old Testament verse, usually maybe something out of Exodus or Leviticus, about like selling your daughter into prostitution, or they'll talk about some of the wars that went on in the Old Testament where God commanded his followers to wipe out this village, like kill every man, woman, and child. And this Christian has no idea like how to answer that. Because they grew up going to a church that talked about an all-loving God. And they're like, well, why is your God telling his soldiers to like wipe out this entire civilization?
Yeah.
And they have no answer for it because they've been taught that God's this big tolerant fluffball.
Yeah, and honestly, if you've ever read the Bible, and I haven't read the entire Bible, but I've read excerpts and in different what's the word I'm looking for? Just different like lines from the Bible. But there's a lot there.
Different verses.
Verses, there you go. Yeah. Wow. Brain farted.
Yeah, it's okay. You don't go to church, so.
But no, we one of the things that isn't discussed quite often enough, and I don't know if that's for the kids' sake, is how much war is actually in the Bible. I mean, if you know the story of David and Goliath, it's probably one of the most popular stories in the Bible. Like, David killed Goliath.
Right.
Like, killed him. Like, no, he didn't injure him. No, he killed him. Right. And I mean that right there. I mean, if you're very religious, I don't want to offend you, but it's one of those things. It's like God was not. There was a time when killing somebody made sense.
And just for the record, David didn't just kill him. I mean, he bashed his head in with a rock and then cut off his head.
It's very. I mean, who was it that was in the pit with the lions? That
Daniel, I believe.
Yeah. So I mean, like there's a lot of trials and tribulations that occurred in the Bible where people were killed. And yeah, I understand that, like, going back that far, like we talked about yesterday, war is always happening. It'll always happen. It'll never stop. But it does date back all the way before Christ. And
right. So do you feel like this is something that the modern church has just ignored or pretended like didn't happen?
I think it's something that maybe the modern church is trying to, avoid to fill a certain agenda.
And to me, that is completely the wrong way to go about it.
Absolutely.
Because when these questions come up, I mean, of course, they're always coming up usually in a malicious way. It's a way to kind of corner you and trap you,
Yep.
to convince you that your faith means nothing or that you don't know anything about it. But in a way, they're actually kind of right when they do it because, yeah, these believers, these Christians don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know how to answer that because they were never taught that.
No, and I mean, I guess like I remember one instance we were walking, me and my brother were walking home. So my dad owned a business right there in the neighborhood we lived in, and we were walking home, and one of the kids that bullied me lived like 2 blocks down from me. So we're walking home from my dad's shop, whatever, and he was out there with a bunch of his buddies I knew from school, and one of them just flat out punched my brother in the face. All right, we were just walking, whatever. Somebody said something. My brother gets heated pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a very short fuse. And my brother didn't do anything. He just kind of stepped up to him, and this kid just flat out punched my brother in the face. And it was kind of funny because my brother didn't do anything, and I was surprised, because my brother punched me, kicked me, that's sibling rivalry shit,
right.
Over dumb shit. This dude flat out punched him in the face. So we walked away and we went to church that Sunday, and we were telling this story about it. And there was actually a guy there from the is it the Gideons that put the Bibles?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was actually a guy from the Gideons Association or whatever they call it.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah, that was there at that time, and we were telling this story, and he goes, you know what? That's great because what God teaches us, that we shouldn't be violent. And then as you get older, you learn how much war and bloodshed was actually in the Bible. It's like does, it's kind of almost
contradiction.
Contradictive.
It's a major contradiction.
And that was the thing, is like as I got older, and that's kind of, I think, one reason why I kind of stopped going to church was because what I was being taught in church was all the lovey-dovey side of the Bible,
right?
And you don't hear about the actual the bad parts of the Bible,
right?
And unfortunately, it kind of sucks because we're raised to think that violence is a bad thing, which violence isn't great. I'm not telling you to go out and beat a bunch of people, but there's certain times in your life when violence is needed.
It's an unavoidable fact of nature.
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable. You're going to come face to face with it at some time. And if you don't, if you've lived a life and violence free, then that's pretty damn privileged.
Absolutely,
that's very blessed in my book.
Oh no, and that's just it. Is and do I believe that enough people aren't maybe seen in the church? Probably, because the one thing that church did teach me was morals.
Right.
And how to be,
right.
But it didn't necessarily teach me how to handle bad people.
No,
if that makes sense.
It really didn't. I mean, they talked about Satan, and some churches talked a lot about Satan and demons and how to spiritual warfare type thing. But it's when I worked in corrections, it's how much of the spiritual warfare is gonna save me during a staff assault. It's I need to get physical at that point.
Exactly.
And that's something that you really don't learn in the church. You don't learn how to be a warrior. And it's interesting when you look at a lot of characters, especially in the Old Testament and even some in the New Testament, you do see a lot of warriors who inspire those stories. But you don't really get that in the church anymore. It's all this lovey-dovey circle jerk, and it's I'm not into it. I'm not buying it.
No, and like we stated earlier, it's just it's more like it's there to fill an agenda for said whatever, and it's come down to people don't know how to process evil, and the thing is and that's what happens when people step out of the church, and you kind of mentioned before we sat down to talk about how less and less people every year are attending church, and the thing is in church, we're not taught how to face evil, even though evil exists. And it talks about evil. It talks about how there's always evil in the world. And that's why when things like mass shootings happen, or people get killed, or people freak out because they don't know how to deal, because that is nothing but pure evil.
Right.
And people don't know how to deal with that. And that also comes from just being raised on the aspect of telling your kids that, oh, we don't need violence, we don't need this. Well, violence is going to happen. And yes, you don't need to be an act of violence, but you need to know how to react to violence.
Right. I mean, I was always taught violence is just it's just like any other characteristic a human can have, or an action that a human can have. It's all about how you use it. I mean, so some of the most lethal men that I've ever met are some of the most well-behaved guys that I've ever met.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I met some of these guys in corrections, and some of these guys had very long military careers. I mean, these guys are the type of guys that could kill you with their hands, like
Yep.
in a matter of under 10 seconds easily. And these guys were very well-behaved, but they had a very undertone. They had violence in their back pocket.
Oh yeah, it's like my grandfather, my mom's stepdad. He's a retired Green Beret.
Right.
Like,
Perfect example.
And you would never meeting him, you would never know this about him because he's the most goofiest motherfucker you'd ever meet in your life. And he's one of those guys that he tells jokes that aren't really that good, but it makes him laugh, so him laughing makes you laugh.
Right.
He's one of those kind of guys. And it was always a blast growing up with him. But I didn't know till probably 10 years after he married my grandma that he used to be in the special forces. No idea. And so it's one of those things. Is like there's people out there walking among us that you don't know. Like one of the sergeants in my unit, was in my unit. She's a black belt, but she's like 5'3", like 130 pounds. Like you would never know that she has what she has in her back pocket, and.
Well, that's getting into American martial arts, and that's a whole nother.
But I'm just saying, like you're talking about people who have violence in their back pocket. That's or not violence, but
I know
lethal force, so to
right.
speak.
Exactly, and I bet you that guy that you knew who was the Green Beret, he was a goofy guy, easy to get along with, but you wouldn't like him when he was angry.
Absolutely,
like the Hulk.
Yeah, exactly, and it was crazy, dude.
But on the flip side, you have violent men, and these are the wolves of the human species. These are like your gang members. These are your terrorists. These are rogue soldiers or politicians, or not really politicians, but guys who use violence to prey on weaker people.
Yeah,
because they can. And the only people that are there to stop these guys are those violent men that we just talked about. Those violent men that know how to conduct themselves in day-to-day life and are very disciplined.
Yeah.
It's something that I think, even guys like you and me strive to be.
Yeah.
We strive to be those guys. But, it is what it is.
But talking about the new church and getting back to topic here, not that we were really off topic, but getting back to what we're talking about, I think that, like you said, it's more of a social religion now. And I think that just comes, like, they're trying to incorporate things like social media into that, and they're trying to incorporate, trends and things of that nature into whatever they're talking about. But you can't do that in the house of faith, because it doesn't go hand in hand. Like, yes, is there bad temptation out there? Of course, it's always been there.
Right.
But when we start moving away from what the core root and foundations of the church were and what they were founded on, you kind of at that point void your purpose.
Right. That's another. I mean, moving on with the church, it's like it doesn't seem to set up its members for reality.
Absolutely.
Especially kids growing up in the church. A lot of kids who grew up in the church, especially if they stay in the church, a lot of them, are very sheltered.
Yep.
They don't know how to deal with, like you said, evil people, and you can tell. You can usually pick out that kid that was that grew up in the church and stayed in it and all that.
Yeah. My brother's wife was actually. I don't know if it was a church thing that she did, but she was homeschooled growing up. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the same thing, because she was led to believe a lot of different things. Now, she's Republican, so, I mean, it couldn't have been all bad. But but
that's debatable.
She was led to believe, certain things. And that's even, I think that sometimes that's even worse than the church itself, because you don't get that outside influence. And when those people don't have that public influence on their life,
right?
When they go out and they do their own thing, they don't know how, like you said, they don't know how to handle it. Yeah. They're raised very sheltered. They're raised very just not the way that people should be raised.
Right. Well, I mean, people should be raised. That's a very relative term, but I know what you're saying. They do have a hard time out in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when shit hits the fan, they don't know what to do.
Right, because they were never taught to. They were always taught to avoid or to suppress.
Yep. And it's kind of funny because Joe Rogan talks on his episode with Jocko Willink about how people have to struggle. And the thing is Christopher Titus. He's a comedian. If you guys don't know who he is, you guys should look him up. He's pretty funny. He talks about he grew up in a really like hard household. Like his dad was really tough on him, stuff like that. Whatever. He was raised pretty rough, but he in one of his bits he talks about how crazy people, when shit hits the fan, we know to move out of the way, and people who've never like dealt with that kind of like stress or that kind of a situation, they just kind of stand there because they don't know what to do.
Oh, right. Yeah, like if you were in the hood and somebody shoots off a gun, you're going to see people diving behind trash cans, ducking, behind cars. But yeah, you go shoot a gun off in a rich, vibrant white neighborhood, you're going to see people just stand around like, what?
Like what just happened? Yeah.
Right.
Because they're not raised around that. And I feel like that's where the church fails, is they don't prep people for the evil that exists in the world, because it's everywhere. I mean, we have some of the worst crime in the United States. We really do. I mean, how many murders are there in Omaha? Average a month.
Usually a couple to 4.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they average.
That's a month. Now, that's Omaha. For those of you who don't know what Omaha is, like it's a big city in Nebraska, obviously, but like when that's 4 murders in Omaha per month, and it could be more. Honestly, I didn't look.
Sometimes it's more, but usually they average about 36 to 60 a year.
Yeah. Okay. Now think of places like Chicago, Detroit, New York, L.A.
Oh yeah, Chicago easily tops over 700 every year, easily. On their worst year, yeah, they get close to $1,000.
Yeah, that's people don't like, the church doesn't talk about evil in that sense. They talk about evil as in like sins.
Mythical, mythical, and then sins.
You shouldn't get tattoos. You shouldn't drink. You
shouldn't have sex before marriage.
Like, I'm sorry, and this could just be me talking. In my opinion, obviously it's my opinion, but
yes.
I think there's a lot of other things that we need to worry about other than those simplistic ideals that at one point would have made sense. In the 15th, 16th century, okay, having sex out of wedlock, whatever, great. I mean, but in today's world, like, those simplistic ideas need to be, and this is, I blame this more on not necessarily the church, but the person giving the sermon. Those simplistic ideals need to be elaborated on and put more towards modern ideals.
So you're basically saying the church needs to evolve and change.
Not necessarily evolve and change, but take the scripture that they're reading and take that evil that the Bible talks about and put it into modern day terms for these guys, these young kids that are going to be in the world in the next 15 to 20 years, and make them understand that, yeah, we don't have people out there shooting people with bows and arrows and stabbing people anymore. Like, people are getting shot in the streets, that it does exist. And youth groups need to start training their young adults on how to be ready to face this if they come across it.
And they need to teach them how to bring back the bow and arrow, because that was a great weapon.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm kidding. But no, I see what you're saying. They need to make it more relatable.
Relatable.
And I honestly think a lot of churches try, because a lot of sermons that I have attended, they've tried to make it very relatable. They talked about, like, if Jesus was alive today, he'd be a superstar on Twitter, and this is what he'd say, and this is the reactions he'd get. And, it's like, it's kind of really lame and kind of cringy. I just think they really have a hard time doing it. It's a lot of trouble. And honestly, I don't know how to tell them to make it more relatable. I guess I would just tell them to just keep it simple and just tell it how it is. But
I definitely don't think that like, putting Jesus on the pedestal of, like, being a Twitter star, like, it doesn't seem appropriate. Yeah, it really doesn't seem to fit what you're trying to, like, the message you're trying to get across. Because honestly, if you want to talk about some of the most worst influence right now in the world, it's social media.
All right.
And that's just my opinion. But I mean, to make it relatable, I mean, you don't need to rewrite the Bible, but do a little bit more, like, thought into, like, the way that you deliver your message. In the aspect of, like, how, like, when you look at a situation, how can you make it relatable? Like think of an example that you can pull out of the news or out of, in the past 5 years, because there's situations, there's breaking news every day, but find something in the last, like, 2 years or something that makes it relatable, and then use that and make that part of your sermon, so people get a better understanding as to what the like to your message.
Right. And honestly, I think a lot of them try, but the problem is there's a lot of topics that they want to avoid talking about. And they have a lot of red tape. You see this in a lot of corporations, but you see it in churches too, just community churches.
Yeah. The whole red tape thing is kind of dumb in itself.
Well, and you're going to find red tape everywhere. One reason why I wanted to talk about this particular subject today is because talking about church or religion or anything is very hard to do even out in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're talking about it in a very critical sense.
Yeah.
People, like, when you start bringing up religion, you can just feel the tension moving in the room, especially for somebody who is not enthusiastic about religion at all.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to talk about it because this is a very hard topic to talk about, and you don't hear too many podcasts talking about it in kind of the sense that we are, where we're kind of breaking it down, dissecting it. We have a little experience in the church. We're not really pro or con, but we're kind of just talking about our observations. You don't hear a lot of that.
No, you don't.
It's always either coming from a very religious podcast promoting their religion and giving sermons, or it's coming from like an atheist or an agnostic that's criticizing religion.
Exactly. And honestly, like I believe people should believe whatever, believe whatever they want to believe. Because at least you're believing in something. There's people out there that struggle every day to find something to motivate them and get them up off the couch.
Right.
And at least if you're practicing your faith, at least you're one step ahead of those people.
Right.
So, I guess like when it comes like the modern church today isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just we need to get away from and this goes for all realms of everything. Where you have influence on people, we need to get away from using that influence to fuel a social agenda, because it's not,
or a financial agenda, really.
Yeah, that too.
I think that's honestly been a big part of when you see the exodus of like the modern church. And when I say modern church, I'm not just talking about Roman Catholics. I'm talking about all of them, all denominations, all the Protestants. So. I think a big part of it is you see the hypocrisy, you see the sex scandals.
Yep.
I mean, the Catholic Church, a priest that molests kids, it's not, most of them don't, but there's been enough of them to where they become the butt of the joke. Excuse, my pun there. But yeah.
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
And we see, and it's not even like, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, I guess, like.
Well, I just saw an infomercial. It was basically one of those ads like from a law firm, and it was talking about if you were molested or sexually preyed upon by a Catholic priest, no matter how long ago it was, call us and we'll see if the statute of limitations apply to you. Because I guess they just passed a law where they extended the statutes of limitations on that. And so I thought it was kind of humorous. I mean, obviously because I wasn't molested, but at the same time I was like, that's kind of sad. That they have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just kind of that's just kind of it's kind of one of those stranger than fiction things. I was like, I never would have thought I would have seen an a little infomercial like that.
That is kind of crazy. But yeah, it's. I mean, I guess one of the biggest ones would be Joel Osteen. I'm sure you know who that is.
Yeah, Joel Osteen's definitely somebody that we should talk about real quick.
But. It was when Hurricane Harvey hit Texas, and he...
Right. And for those of you who don't know, Joel Osteen runs one of the biggest congregations in the country. He runs a church, I believe it's called Lakewood, out of Houston, Texas, and they pretty much converted a whole... it was like a
stadium.
Yeah, it was a stadium into the church. I mean, the church is huge.
Yeah, it's
not the biggest congregation, but it's up there.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest in the country.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievably huge. And the dude has profited a lot from writing books.
Yes.
I mean, every time he comes out with a book, it seems like every month, and then he promotes it to his congregation, and so he gets sales.
Yep, and that was one of the things is like, if we talk about God being fluffy and, lovey-dovey and stuff, it kind of makes you wonder, because when Hurricane Harvey hit Texas, that it really hit Joel Osteen really hard, because he did not let his church be used for people that were affected by the flooding.
Right.
And don't you think that would kind of go against like your whole
message?
Yeah, your whole message to your congregation, like love one another as as though that as your friend or whatever.
Well, yeah, it definitely put a horrible image on his PR, as it should have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here you have a giant space. Most of us don't have a giant space like that.
Exactly.
And he didn't let in people who really needed it for whatever reason. My guess was he just didn't want them messing up
his church. Yeah, exactly.
Which they're gonna do because people are filthy. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and so that was one of those things. Is like that kind of made me lose faith in the church a little bit, to be honest with you, because like he had the opportunity to really push his PR.
Yeah.
And he did exactly the complete opposite.
I thought eventually, after all the media storm happened, I thought he gave in and then eventually started letting people come in.
He did.
But by that time, it was already... the damage was done. You might as well have just not done that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you're looking out for your image, if you really do care and you saw that you were doing wrong, then, kudos to you, but I don't think that's what it was.
I don't either. I think he was
trying to reverse the PR damage that happened.
And I think part of that might have been because if I'd been a part of that congregation and I'd seen that, I'd have been like, bro, I'm finding a new church.
I'm sure some of them did.
Yeah, because if I would have been a member of that congregation and been stranded by that flood,
yeah,
like I would have been honestly I would have been mad,
right?
Because that was one of the things growing up in church is like at least my church, man. If you ever needed a place to stay, you ever needed anything, the church went out of the way to help you find it, and that way and that was just that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when a lot of people think of like church and religion, that's kind of the things that kind of come to mind. That selfless act. People they expect people that are in churches to be selfless,
right?
And they're not wrong. I mean, technically, yeah, you could be,
yeah.
But it kind of goes with that. Lower your expectations, you'll never be disappointed. But at the same time, that was always the one thing that kind of fueled me to be a better person was having those ideals and morals to be raised on was, help somebody out when they need help, and I think that's where he messed up was he really kind of took that message and just kind of like threw it out the window at that point in time.
Right, at a very critical time.
Exactly.
Because, yeah, you want churches to be selfless. That's what people expect them to be. Even, they may or may not be. But, yeah, you don't want people to take advantage of them. But, yeah, during a crisis like that was a pretty clear-cut situation. And, that's one of those situations where it's like, yeah, as a church, you better step up and do something.
Yeah, and, I mean, look at when Nebraska flooded earlier this year. It wasn't just churches; it was schools.
Oh yeah,
like everybody was opening their doors. I offered people who had been affected that I knew personally. I knew people that I knew personally. I'm like, hey, if you need a place to crash, I got a couch, I got an extra room. You just let me know. Because we didn't get affected by it, but people we worked with did.
Yeah,
and that was one of those things. Is like you don't have to go to church to be a good person.
No, you don't. You don't even have to be a religious person to be a good person.
Exactly.
And I think most people know this.
Yeah, and that's and we need to get back on that subject where the church is, churches need to get back on that and stop worrying about so much of the social aspect of it and just teach people to be good people.
Right.
So,
but good people again can be a relative term. Yeah, what defines a good person?
Yeah, you're right.
So, but yeah, the whole point is none of this is easy.
No.
This is just observations that I've seen. I've given, my excuses why I don't attend church anymore.
Yeah, me too.
And you have too. We both took away, I think, some good morals from the church and being a part of that community.
I think it's a good idea for everybody at some point to attend a sermon, and even if you don't listen, even if you take nothing away from the sermon, take something away from the people that attend the church. Because some of those people are going to be some of the nicest people you ever met, and they will give you the shirt off their back, even though they don't know you.
Yes. Because
that's the kind of people they are.
That's, and you can't say that for all of them. I will say there's been many people scorned by many churches.
Yeah.
And their members. But yeah, definitely in some of these churches, you will find some of the best people that you'll ever meet.
Yep.
But, you can find people like that in other places too. But yeah, I guess the thing that makes me kind of depressed about the whole modern church kind of declining and stuff is because, like, you know, back in our grandparents' days, which obviously we don't live in those days anymore, it kind of, like, we'll say like a town like Fremont here, it really brought the community together.
Yeah.
You know, you have these different churches, and, you know, it really kind of kept the community in close ties, you know, outside of politics and outside of the school system.
Yep.
And that was good. I felt like the community was stronger. You know, today you don't have that as much as numbers decline. And I think we are seeing a little bit of an effect of that when the community's not tied together in other ways other than politics.
Yep. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, but I think that's enough for today.
Yeah.
Good discussion.
Again, if you guys have anything you guys want to add to it or want us to talk about or even just a general topic and, you know, that you guys want to hear, remember you can get a hold of us at midwestmymelt@gmail.com.
Check out our Facebook page too.
Yeah, at Midwest My Melt. We do have a YouTube channel now. So obviously if you're watching this video, subscribe, because we're going to have more videos out like this that are going to be touching on subjects like these that I don't know, maybe you'll take something away from it, but I know I did. So.
And if you don't, then just go eat your bacon, you filthy infidel.
You guys have a good week.